In this episode, I talk about gateway games and how I think that they're bringing more painters into the hobby. Now, I've talked about gateway games on the channel before. A gateway game, as I like to think of it, is generally a game where it's kind of like a board game, but there are miniatures on it, and not just playing pieces, but actual, like, I have to figure out what the range is from this one to that one. And I have to figure out whether that guy has cover, and I have to figure out whether I have line of sight, and that kind of stuff, where it brings a lot of the miniatures rules, miniatures mechanics, brings those things into something that board gamers and other types of gamers can kind of grasp a little bit more easily. Now, of course, one of the best gateway games out there, and is selling like gangbusters, of course, is Star Wars X-Wing. But that's not really the scope of what I'm talking about in this video. I'm talking more about games like Zombicide and Imperial Assault, and some of the games like, there's a lot of them right now, but the thing that they all have in common is that they come with lots and lots of miniatures that are unpainted. Games like Descent, games like Dungeon Saga, all these different games, tabletop wargamers will like them as well because they are kind of miniature-y, but people who are more into board games and things like that can also kind of understand it, and they're not too afraid by, a lot of terrain and pulling out rulers and doing all that stuff. It's a lot of like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm five away from that guy. You can just kind of do that stuff, but you still have all of these models, all of these miniatures, which are generally, even though they're, like kind of a less expensive plastic, they're not like normal GW plastic or whatever, they're still very highly detailed in a lot of different situations. I've rarely come across models in those types of games now in this day and age where I've been like, those models are not great. Now, one of the first videos that our friend Sam Lenz, that he did on this channel, was about how to paint Zombicide miniatures. It's up here. And you can watch it and learn about how to quick paint, all the models that come in that game. And there are a lot. Since we've done that video, I think somewhere between 5 and 120,000 expansions for Zombicide have come out. So you have lots and lots and lots of choice about which models you want to paint, how you want to do them. The Black Plague game, which is one of the more recentish ones that I can remember, which is basically a whole new base game. It's based in the Middle Ages and stuff like that. It still has zombies and the whole deal, but it's, Middle Ages instead of at the mall, present day. That one, the models specifically, I think, are great looking. And I've seen a lot of tutorials online of people who are going out and painting them and kind of showing them off. And there are people who, in some situations, don't even seem to be what we would consider to be wargamers. So does this act as even more of a gateway? Getting players used to the concept of using figures and measuring range and looking for line of sight, that kind of gets them into the wargaming hobby. But now also giving them these really great models and then seeing all these tutorials online for people to be like, well, I could paint up these stormtroopers pretty easily. I just spray them some white and do a little bit of stuff and a little bit of wash like I saw in that one video, and hey, I got a whole bunch of stormtroopers painted. Well, now that I painted the stormtroopers, I should probably do the rebels. That would be weird if I didn't. And then eventually you're painting the entire box. You know what I mean? So that kind of stuff, bringing, normal gamers, tabletop board gamers, that kind of stuff, maybe card gamers, those kind of people, bringing them into wargaming via these gateway games is great. But sometimes you bring them here to the edge of the door and then you show it to them and then they're like, yeah, but I don't want to paint stuff. But I am seeing now, specifically in a lot of games, Imperial Assault is a big one, and Zombicide is another. I'm seeing where more and more people who've never painted a miniature in their life are like, well, but I'm a really big fan of Star Wars, though, so I got to paint those guys. I got to figure it out, because it's hard to find someone who will just paint that stuff for you, like as a commission painter. Commission painters have a tendency to like to work on really cool projects. If you just say, hey, can you paint up this entire box of Star Wars guys? They're going to be like, a lot of them are just not super interested. Some are, and when you find those, you should not tell anybody, I guess, because then you should just get them to do all your work for you. But in general, it seems as if the hobby is getting to the point where the gateway games, a lot of them, are actually starting to get not only more players, but getting more painters into our big group. that games like X-Wing, because you don't have to paint it, they get more players in, and that's great. But even that is baby steps. You know what I mean? Maybe you start playing X-Wing, and you're like, X-Wing is really cool. That's cool. I don't have to paint any of these guys. I just take them out of the box, and I start to get going. And then you're learning about range and fields of fire and all this stuff. And then you start going, but this in game with the Imperial Assault, that looks really cool, and the tiles and all the hallways and stuff. And then you're like, these things aren't painted though. Oh gosh. And then you start getting into painting. I don't know. I think that it's good. I don't think that it is going to negatively impact the rest of us who are hobby heroes. I think it just helps to get more people into the hobby. It also helps potentially many of us who've been painting what we like to consider normal models for quite some time. It allows a lot of us to kind of help out our friends and be like, hey, have you ever tried a wash? Because that would help you with some detail in that little part there you're doing. And they're like, oh no. And then you show them, and now all of a sudden, you're bringing more people into the hobby, which is, for a lot of us, it really should be our goal. The more people we get into the hobby, the more people you've got to play with, the more people you've got to hang out with. It's always better to have more friends, isn't it?